biggest advantage in real estate isn't about timing the market. It's about recognizing opportunity when you see it. In fact, the most successful real estate investors out there pivot their business with changing market conditions so that they can make money in any market. And while real estate is one of the most powerful ways to build long-term wealth, not every property is created equal. The difference between a good purchase and a great one, oftentimes it comes down to what you can see and what you can't. So on this episode, we're going to break it all down. Things to look for, things to avoid, and how to start thinking about properties and evaluating them with the mindset of how do I build equity starting on day one. So to dig in on this topic, we're going to talk about all of the things that go into evaluating a property, deciding which one is the right one for me. And when we start looking at it through a lens of building that long-term wealth and leave some of the emotion out of it, it starts to make a little more sense. What's the number one thing people tell you when you mention that you're looking for a house or thinking about buying a house? Location, 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 right? That's been told to us for generations. I'm not going to change that. Location is a huge piece of this. And it all starts there. You have to be in the right location if you're building long-term wealth, long-term equity. Now, I mention location, even though it's a simple thing, because I don't want you to just think about what has the nicest school districts. I want you to particularly look for the ugliest house in the nicest neighborhood. That's also another one of these sayings that's been around for a while, but very few people actually break that down on why that's important. Remember, we go back to our step-by-step guide that I provided in episode 2. A big part of the process will be the appraisal. As a reminder, an appraisal is when you're applying for a loan, a mortgage on a house. The bank needs to make sure that the value supports the loan that they're providing. So they're going to hire an appraiser to go out to the property. When I say they're going to hire an appraiser, it's really you, the buyer, that's paying for it. But they have an appraiser go out and look at the property. What they're doing is both evaluating it from a condition standpoint, but more importantly, from a comparable sales approach is the most widely used form of an appraisal. What that means is they're going to look at similar size houses with the similar number of bedrooms and bathrooms and yard space and so on, and they're going to find out what those properties sold for. Now, if you've got the ugliest house in the nicest neighborhood, then that means all of your neighbors, when they've sold their homes, they're going to show higher amounts because they're nicer than yours, right? But what that does is it ends up bringing your value up. We're looking at things like average price, median price. And when that average is automatically higher, just based on the fact that your neighborhood's houses sold for more money, then you automatically start to build that equity. When you buy the nicest house on the worst street, you have the opposite effect. All of the comps from around you will show lower. So even if you put $150,000, $200,000 into a house on remodeling it and making it your dream home, if it's not the right location, the value will be dragged down by the comparable sales. On the flip side of that, when you buy the ugliest house in the nicest neighborhood, you add that value by remodeling it yourself, and the value automatically goes up just because your neighbor's values are higher. Keep that in mind. That'll be a theme throughout. Now, after we've decided on a location, then we start looking at the things that are harder to change. Right? We're going to start out with things like the layout and the bones of the house. What does it mean when somebody says this house has good bones? Generally, what it means is that the foundation, the structural integrity, the support system for the house is all in great shape. The easiest way to recognize obvious structural concerns when you're walking through a house during an initial showing, which you're usually in and out fairly quickly, but the easiest way to evaluate that quickly is pay attention to if any of the floors feel uneven to you. It's not always a structural issue, but it's a good indicator that there's something going on there that we need to look further into. Another place would be when you go down to the basement. Pay attention if you're able to see the foundation, pay attention to what type of foundation it is. There's options like fieldstone, like cement block, like poured concrete. These are all varying ways of building houses that have changed throughout the years. I think the best one to see if you're looking for something that's both structurally and usually very waterproof is going to be a poured concrete foundation. They started building houses with poured concrete foundations in the 50s, and we still use that to pour new construction foundations today. Look for things like doors don't close right, If you think you're seeing uneven base trim or a door frame that just looks odd, don't just write it off that you're seeing things. Bring it up. Bring it up to your realtor. Bring it up to your inspector if you end up going under contract on the property, and let them help you evaluate that. Now, after you've decided that structurally the bones of the house are good, next thing to check is the layout. Does the layout work for you? Most importantly, if this is going to be your own personal home for the foreseeable future, it's got to work for you. Aside from that, you want to see what improvements could you make with the layout and which ones are easy to make versus hard to make. The ones that are more difficult to make are always going to be the ones that involve adding a beam or removing a load-bearing wall. Rely on the advice of those around you. Rely on your realtor. Rely on your inspector. Rely on a contractor that you can call to come evaluate that property as well. Any wall can be removed. Anyone that tells you otherwise clearly doesn't know construction. It's just a matter of how much money you're willing to spend to do it. So removing walls that are not load-bearing are a much simpler project than those that are load-bearing. It doesn't mean that it can't still be done, and it's not as hugely expensive as a lot of people think to do some beam work. But that's where you start. Does this layout work for me as is? If the layout does work for you, great. We move on to the next thing to evaluate. If it doesn't work for you, we need to spend some time at that step and understand what it's going to take to get it from where it is the day that you saw it to where it would need to be for you to be comfortable in that layout, for it to work better. If it works better for you, it's probably going to work better for future buyers as well. Then we just figure out the cost of that, and we take that into account when making any offers. Now, if the layout is working, or if you have found a way to make the layout work that is reasonable and that's affordable for you, then we move on to the next thing, condition. So remember, location first, layout and bones second, and then we look at the condition. The condition is something that's almost always easy to change. Things like old finishings. We see people shy away from houses that need updating all the time. And I actually tell you that's where your best opportunities exist, where you don't necessarily need layout changes. You're not making structural changes. It's in a great location. It's just ugly. In my opinion, this is where the greatest sweet spot exists in the market. You find a great house in a great location with great bones and a great layout. But maybe it's full of old wallpaper or ugly paint colors or things like old cabinets or old vanities, old tile, things like that. Those are all things that can be fixed over time without spending huge amounts of money. And you could even move in as is, even though it's ugly, and fix a little bit at a time. That's where I see homeowners being the most successful, not purchasing a house with the intention of gutting everything on day one, but move right in and take one room at a time and fix it. Make a list, have it in order of what's most important to you, and go right down that list and tackle one job every 6 months or 12 months. And before you know it, you're going to have that fully renovated house, but you're going to do it the right way, by doing it yourself, by building equity, and by building wealth for your future. Now, when making the decision on what things on your list you should prioritize, a lot of that's going to come down to how long you intend to be in the home. Some people buy a starter home and then later upgrade. If your plan is in that 3 to 5 or even 7-year category, then you should focus first on the things that add the most bang for your buck. Where are you going to see your money return to you when you go to sell it in what's relatively a short period for real estate? Now, if you're going to be in the home long term, this is the house that you're going to, be in for 10, 20 or more years, then you can sort of do what's most important to you. And eventually, as long as all of those projects get tackled, your value will increase throughout that time, and you will have a fully remodeled house by the time you get ready to sell or pass down or whatever the case may be. If you have a shorter term plan in mind, what rooms do we focus on? Well, think about when you go look at a house. What are generally the first rooms that buyers are looking in making their decision on how interested they are in the house? They look at kitchen. They look at bathrooms. They want to see them nice. They want to see them updated. Most buyers now expect to see soft close cabinets and stone counters and tile floors, things like that. So a lot of these houses that we're talking about that are in the sweet spot will have none of those. Now, when you're going to remodel that room, kitchen can get pricey. Through Carvia Construction, we've done kitchens for as little as 15 to 20,000 range. We've done kitchens over 100,000. It really comes down to your budget and what the size of the space is, and then what your taste in finishing materials are. But know that kitchen is one of those rooms that you can put money into if you've selected the right house and the right neighborhood with the good bones. You could put that money in and you'll get that money back. Bathrooms are very similar. And then don't forget, one of the things that always brings more value comes down to how many people are interested in the property. So simple things like removing old wallpaper and painting, replacing areas of old horsehair plaster and putting up sheetrock, those things can all add value, not necessarily a dollar for dollar sense like a kitchen or a bathroom would, but simple changes like that, changing flooring. When you see things like the old laminate floors that always have the corners peeling up, those things just don't look nice, right? I see lots of buyers that get scared away by simple things like flooring, like wallpaper, like paint colors, like lighting, things like that. Those are all simple fixes. And if you buy a house that's in this sweet spot, you'll be glad you did. It's not like you can't make money on the full gut renovations, but it's harder to get yourself into that spot, to have the cash on hand to handle a project like that, or be able to deal with a renovation mortgage to be able to handle that project. Which is why, again, that sweet spot is the one that is mostly cosmetic changes that are needed. Now, I mentioned full gut renovations. A lot of times we see on the market these flip houses that come up. Now, I've flipped houses before, and I will tell you that just like I've said about agents, like inspectors, like lenders, all flippers are definitely not created equal. I walk houses with clients all the time, and I see flips that I would never buy, that I do advise my clients not to buy. And you see a lot of people using the same finishings, right? When you look on these listings and you see a group of flips that were all done, and you're looking through the pictures, you see almost the same cabinets, almost the same counters, almost the same paint colors, and almost the same flooring in nearly all of them. Why do you think that is? Do you think that all flippers have the same taste? No. The truth is that most flippers are going to Home Depot and buying the cheapest material that they can find to flip a house. They're making a quick in and out investment. It has to pay off immediately. So they look for what looks the nicest, but maybe isn't always the best long-term value. They don't care about the long-term. They're in and out. You as the buyer, you should care about the long-term. And this is where I usually advise my clients to stay away from the flips, because when I walk through them, I see the quality of the work that was done. I see the quality of the material. And if I wasn't in the construction business, maybe I wouldn't pick up on that. But I also see the flip side of it. The flip side of the flip. The flip side of the flip is when the person who bought it after being flipped wants to go sell the property. I just had one of these not too long ago in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I didn't represent this client when he purchased the property. If I had, I would have advised him not to purchase this property because it was a perfect example of a Home Depot flip. The quick in and out, throw lipstick on a pig. When I went in to evaluate the property for what we could sell it for, I was shocked to see that he'd only been in the house for under 2 years. And generally, the house was very clean. I don't think it was something that they were damaging. It was just the quality of the material. There were several cabinet doors that had already been torn off. There were drawers that didn't close correctly. It had laminate floors with those peeling corners that I had mentioned. This person purchased the house in the early days of COVID when the market was a madhouse. And they went in with no inspection. They knew it looked nice. It was their first time purchasing a property. And they made all of the mistakes that I'm trying to tell you to avoid. They bought the house. They've been there a couple of years. It's time for them to upgrade. They call me. I do the walkthrough. We knew we needed to do some work in there for them to make any money on the sale. So through Carvia Construction, we have a program called Sell Ready, where we will actually front all of the renovation cost for work that's needed to be able to get you the most bang for your buck when you sell. So we went in there, we did about $20,000 worth of work to the house. And by our estimation, we expected that putting that $20,000 in would bring about $35,000 to $40,000 in returned value. So basically double the investment. The way that the program works is the seller pays us when the house sells out of the proceeds at closing for the work that we did, and they keep the rest. So in this case, we did about $20,000 worth of work. We ended up selling that house for $57,000 over what our original estimate was had we not done the work. So that simple $20,000 investment with no upfront cost to the client ended up netting them an extra $37,000 after paying us at closing. And it all worked out, but there's a lot of situations it doesn't. And that's what we're trying to avoid by evaluating the properties correctly. We don't care about the cosmetic issues as much, especially if you're buying at the right price. The reason why I don't like to advise clients for flips, even if they were done correctly, even if they were done by a good contractor, by a good investor that took the time and used better quality material, at the end of the day, we're trying to build wealth. This is where we leave the emotion out of it as much as possible. I know that it's easier to leave emotion out of it when you're looking at it as an investment and rather than as your primary residence. But to the ability that you can, push as much emotion to the side and judge it for what it is. Look at the numbers. Look at it as an asset. If the goal here is to build equity and build wealth over time, then buying something that's fully remodeled at the top of the market is not going to put you in a position to succeed. The right way to evaluate the property, look at these issues that we're talking about today, pick the right property, put your money into the right spots, and eventually you will get a huge return on that investment. The last thing that I want to touch on quickly regarding evaluating the property is the things like mechanical, electrical, plumbing. I'm hesitant to discuss this at much length at this time because I think they really could use their own episode. I think at some point we're going to get out on the road and I'm going to take you guys with me to a couple of job sites so I can explain to you what you're seeing. Not just imagining it. It's more difficult to talk about it than it is to see it. But of course, you need to look at things like mechanical system, right? Do you have connected water, connected sewer, or is it on a well and septic? And make sure that you're somewhat knowledgeable in what kind of maintenance all of those systems require. You're going to need to know if the house is on oil or if it's on gas or if it's an electric heat pump system. You're going to need to be able to recognize some things with electrical, right? We need to know at least what Romex wiring looks like and recognize that that's a newer form of wiring that's the most widely used today, and it's the safest. So if we know what that looks like, then it's easier to recognize the ones that we don't want to see, the knob and tube wiring, especially in New England. This is a very prevalent issue. And even if you're able to purchase a property with it, if you have an inspection done later by your insurance company, they will give you a hard time about having knob and tube wiring. If you try to get your house insulated, there's a great program through Rise. They will have a problem with knob and tube wiring. So I didn't skip over it just because it's not important. It's really because it's so important that we're going to spend some time on some of the job sites with Carvia Construction, and I'll show you these things rather than just talking about them. Of course, with any specific questions, feel free to even send me a photo and ask me, hey, do you know what I'm looking at here? I'm happy to help. So let's just recap for a second and remember, you don't want to just buy the nicest house. You want to buy the one with the nicest potential. You have to look at things like location, like the bones, like the layout, and then the condition. Make a decision based less on emotion and more on financial responsibility and asset growth. That's what's going to build that wealth for the future. If you're looking at properties and not sure what you're looking at, that's where I come in. I walk properties every day with clients and help them recognize what's a good deal and what just looks like one on the surface. So if you're thinking about buying, even if you're early in the process, reach out. I can help you evaluate your options and make sure you're making a smart decision from the start. Here's my contact info. Reach out anytime. And if you got value from this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name's Dave Zuller. This is Foundation to Equity, building wealth one property at a time. We'll see you on the next one.